Okay, so right now we're going to make tomato sauce. And a lot of times we think of tomato sauce as like marinara you buy at the grocery store, or the pizza sauce that we make for our pizzas, but traditional French tomato sauce is different. And some of the reasons why it's different is it has a lot more of a savory component. It's not as sweet, not nearly as sweet as a tomato sauce that we're used to. And the reason that's so important is it does a really good job of making other sauces. I mean, that's the whole point of mother sauces, is to make other sauces out of mother sauces. So what I have working in my pan right now is some really, really nice pancetta, or you can use salt pork or bacon. Just some pancetta is what I had left over. And I'm rendering the fat from that. And once this renders down, I'm gonna add this mirepoix veg. And it's classic mirepoix, so it's 2 parts onion to 1 part carrot, 1 part celery. It adds a lot of flavor, just like you would with the stock, but it doesn't, that looks good, but it's just for flavor, so I've got it. Also, if you notice, I have some leafy bits. Some chefs would get real upset about these leafy bits, but I actually find them really good. I think there should be just a touch of bitter in every bite, and these leafy bits are really nice and fresh tasting. They add a lot of flavor, and they add just a little bitterness that I actually think helps enhance your flavor. So I'm gonna throw this in here. I can tell you that my pancetta is not fatty enough, so I'm gonna add a little oil. I'm gonna step off for a second. And so this is really important. If you're gonna add an oil, add a really mild flavor oil. This is just a canola olive oil mix. There we go. That nice dark brown is a good thing in the bottom of your pan, because that is flavor. Just like when you're roasting stock, bones for stock, makes an amazing flavor. So we're just gonna let this saute for a few minutes and let the onions kind of caramelize and get translucent a little bit. And then when we come back, we'll add our tomatoes and our stock. Okay, so we have sauteed our mirepoix vegetables with our really nice pancetta that wasn't fatty enough, with just a little bit of oil. And then now the onions have caramelized just a little bit for some flavor development. And then they've softened and become translucent, which for all of us in the cooking field, we know that's very important. And then we've got a nice saute on the other vegetables that are in the pot. And now I'm gonna deglaze the pan with the stock. This is a nice chicken stock I made in my house. It calls for white stock, but traditionally, right out of Le Guide Culinaire by Escoffier, a white stock traditionally would be made with veal bones. And I'm not gonna do that for this, because this is very approachable. You can just make a nice chicken stock. I made this with leftover bones from a roasted chicken. That's why it's a little darker in color. But the flavor is on point, and it will not mess up the color. Okay, so I've got my stock, and I'm going to deglaze the pan. It's a lot of stock, so it's not gonna make a lot of noise. And this was, I have to remember, 52 ounces of stock. Took me a second to do that. Just under 3 quarts. Well, it was, I lied. This was 2 1/4 quarts. There we go. Now I could feel with my spoon, I could feel that the bits have come up off the bottom. That's really important, because those bits add flavor, but if they're not deglazed off the bottom of the pan, then they turn into burnt bitterness. It's gross. So just make sure that you got all those bits off the bottom. And the last thing I'm gonna do is, I have a sachet, and the reason you do a sachet in a tomato sauce, and maybe not other sauces that you'll see later, or in other videos, is that you wanna scoop this out. You don't want these things actually pureed with the rest of the sauce. So this has garlic, parsley stems, bay leaf, and thyme, fresh thyme in there. So I'm gonna throw that in there, and I like to always push it down. It's fun to watch, like, it's just for fun really, because it's gonna go in there. And then I have a little bit of sugar. Notice I haven't salted this, and the reason I haven't salted this is because I'm using canned tomatoes. I only like to use fresh tomatoes when they're in peak season, because otherwise they just don't really taste like anything. And so these are canned tomatoes, and I really love using canned tomatoes for sauce because they pick them at the peak of their season and then can them, especially when you get a really nice quality canned tomato. And so I used the canned tomato because I know that my flavor will be better, and also I don't have to deal with the skins, which is great. But I do have a little bit of sugar that I'm gonna add, and this will help sweeten up the tomatoes and help round out our now very umami pot of sauce. So that's 3/4 of an ounce. And then I'm going to take my tomatoes here and pour them in here and try not to spill. Okay. So I'm gonna take these tomatoes, and I'm just gonna pour them in here, and it's gonna splash a little. Ooh, try not to splash. Those squishies. There we go. It's pretty good. Minimal splashing. Okay. Back in the day when I wore only whites, let me tell you, tomato sauce was my nemesis. So I make this fancy tomato sauce, and I'd splash myself no matter how hard I tried on my beautiful white coats. Yeah. Spent many a night getting tomato stains out of my white coats. Great, so this is the easy part. We're gonna take this, I'm gonna push it to the back, and I'm gonna let it simmer for about 1 hour to 2 hours. And then if there are any little scuzzies that come to the top, I'm gonna skim them off. But really at this point, your sauce is almost done. You just let time and heat do its job. So, I wanna show you the scuzzies. This is what we were talking about right here. This can affect the texture of your sauce, which is why it's important. It's not quite as important with tomato sauce, but it's still important. And in your Espagnole sauce, it's incredibly important. It'll actually make it taste gritty if you stir this back in there. So you don't have to freak out about it. You don't have to go overboard, but just kind of have a bowl and a spoon ready, and you just skim that off the top when it shows up. It's that simple. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. Okay, so what I've done here is I've run my tomato sauce through a food mill. And as you can see, it's cut all these bits here. And what you have left is this really beautiful tomato sauce. And again, you can see it's thick, but it's not thick like a tomato sauce you would think of like a pizza sauce. And that's really important to note, because this, again, is a conduit for other sauces. So if you need it thicker, you reduce it, or you could add a thickening agent. Remember, this doesn't have any thickening agent in it. The only thing that's thickening this are the tomatoes and vegetables. And this is tomato sauce.